Welcome to the Further Light Podcast, presented by Wisconsin Freemasonry, helping you accomplish your Masonic goals through education and more light. And now, I present to you, Brother Chris Ludke.
Listeners, scholars, brothers, this is Brother Chris Ludke, and today I want to look at the Ozaukee County draft riot. Now, this doesn't seem like a big deal, but yet the Ozaukee draft riot is a significant issue both in Masonry and historically during the American Civil War. And we're tying directly to one lodge's history itself. We've taken a look time to time throughout the podcast at really the gritty elements, the social history of Freemasonry, whether it's in World War II, whether it's the Morgan Affair, whether it's elsewhere. And today I want to look at this on the home front. We're traveling to November 10th, 1862. We're in Port Washington, Wisconsin. Beautiful town these days, probably beautiful back then as well. Most history books mention the Ozaukee County draft riot as a political explosion, but there is a version of the story that remains tucked away in the archives of the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin, an archive that I dug through a couple of years ago for a symposium episode that we did on Masonry in the Civil War. I did the archival research through as much material as I could find at the time. And here, the madness of war didn't just target government offices, it actually came for the lodge room itself. Now, some background. By the autumn of 1862, the Union was desperate for manpower. The initial fervor of volunteerism had completely vanished, replaced by the grim reality of the draft. In Ozaukee County, tensions were at a breaking point. The local population, largely immigrants who had fled the autocracies of Europe, viewed the draft with suspicion. They didn't just hate the policy, they hated the people they believed were behind it. There was this belief that what would happen is the poor and the working class would be forced to go to war while the wealthy would be left behind. And the local people who were kind of in the middle of it were the Masons. In Port Washington, many of the men on the draft board happened to be Masons. And even in the 1860s, even after those shifts, after the anti-Masonic party in the 1830s and 40s, where Masonry becomes more middle class, somewhat blue collar, although not much at the time, people are still concerned that these people are well off, well connected, and likely to skip out themselves, arguing that maybe those members of the draft board were just trying to keep their friends and family out of it. For the agitated crowd, the local Masonic Hall became a symbol of the establishment. The distinction between the government and the local elite blurred, and to the rioters, the Masons were synonymous with the political order that was tearing their families apart. On November 10th, the mob didn't just gather at the courthouse, they marched on the lodge. As reported in Forward Freemasonry and elsewhere, the scene at the lodge was one of chaotic destruction. The mob storms the building, intent on tearing down the very symbols of the fraternity. Think about the atmosphere. This is a place meant for tranquility and brotherhood, now filled with the shouts of men wielding clubs and stones and potentially worse. The rioters tore through the meeting hall, vented their rage on the furniture and the symbols of the degrees. They destroyed the master's carpet, a vital piece of ritual furniture. In that moment of sheer panic, the brothers had to make a choice. They couldn't save the chairs or the altar, but they could save the authority of the lodge. In a desperate, split-second action, the charter of the lodge was snapped from the wall and shoved deep into a crevice in the same wall, hidden away from the prying eyes and destructive hands of the mob. It's the only way to preserve the soul of the lodge while its body was being wrecked around them. The damage was extensive. It wasn't just a shattered window or a broken door. It was the violation of a sacred space that would take months to repair. The official meeting minutes from the lodge in that period is really haunting reading. Quote, "The immediate cause of the general feeling against the draft was to take place this day. Many believe that Masons were the cause of the draft. This day will long be remembered by many as the day of the great Ozaukee County draft riot." But there's more to the story than just anti-government fervor. As we dig deeper into the historical record, we find a specific, bitter complaint: the practice of substitution, a common practice in the American Civil War. Under the rules of the day, a man drafted into the army could avoid service if he could pay a high fee to hire a substitute to take his place, or more commonly, if he had political connections, to secure an exemption. The working class immigrants of Ozaukee County saw this as a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. Because the local board was comprised of prominent community members, many of them Masons, the lodge itself became a lightning rod for the belief that the draft was being manipulated. It's a gritty, uncomfortable truth. But at the end of the day, in the eyes of the rioters, the Masons weren't just brothers. They held the list. They were the ones holding the list, the ones determining who went to slaughter and the ones who could stay home and afford the luxury of continued life. When we look at this draft riot, we see a community pushed to its absolute limit. The rioters were wrong to turn to violence, and the destruction of the lodge was a tragedy. But as Masons, we have to look at why. We have to ask ourselves, how did our predecessors become so disconnected from the people that they lived among that they became the targets of such rage? The history of the craft is not just one of grand ceremonies and noble ideas, it's also the history of being caught in the crossfire of human struggle. When those brothers in Port Washington finally returned to their lodge to find the furniture broken, the master's carpet in shreds, they had to start over. They had to pull the charter out of the wall and begin the process of rebuilding not just the physical walls, but the trust of their community. The Great Ozaukee County Draft Riot serves as a reminder. It reminds us that Masonry does not exist in a vacuum. We are part of the communities we inhabit. And when those communities are suffering, our symbols, our titles will not protect us from the consequences of that suffering. The next time you walk into your lodge room, look at the wall. Imagine the terror of that day in 1862 and the courage it took to hide the charter away, leaving everything else to burn. What does that say about the character of the men in that room at the time? That they chose the charter. They could have chose the master's jewel, past master's jewels, things of intrinsic value, and yet they took something to hide of value only to them. There's no pawn shop. There's no one looking to collect Masonic warrants, and yet that is the thing that they took. I think that's really outstanding. It tells us, in part, the things that they found important in the moment. Oftentimes it is said that the character of a man can be determined in the split-second decisions they make in the moment when crisis surrounds them, and here they took the warrant. They let the rest of it be destroyed, taken, damaged. But the warrant they saved. It reminds us that the most important part of Masonry isn't a building. It's the brothers who even in wreckage decide to keep the flame alive. It is a remarkable story. And it says a lot about Masonry. Both the good, the charter or the warrant, and the bad. The fact that these were the guys, the prominent members of the community who were in charge of the local draft board. And that attracts the attention of the community to the lodge, resulting in this rioting. history is never clear. There oftentimes are not winners and losers, but sometimes getting into the mud of history can be interesting. That being said, I want to thank you for joining me, Brother Chris Leakey, and the entire Further Light team on your quest to find more light through Masonry.
Are you interested in learning more about Freemasonry in Wisconsin? Visit wisconsinmasons.org to learn more about Masonry and access further educational content and more light. Once again, that address is wimasons.org. Any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email us at education@wisconsinmasons.org. And thank you for listening.